Warm welcome, Shashi ji. How are you, sir?
Hello, how are you?
Former CEO Prasar Bharti, the great, man on board today Vision India Forum. The series will explore the genesis, the growth story, the movement, and the future of Prasar Bharti, India's public broadcaster. Prasar Bharti's former CEO, the man who held the stint for 5 years, just before this, somebody who is credited with a lot of reforms and also with global initiatives as far as the national public broadcaster Prasar Bharti is concerned, something with which the nation's growth story is inextricably linked, is on board with us. The Amrit Kal series, Road to 2047. No dialogue or monologue can be completed, or no project of this kind can be completed without involving the role, the growth, and the future of Prasar Bharti, which has always documented, which has showcased, which has reflected India's growth over the last 75 years and going forward. A lot of ups and downs, but Mr. Vempati is somebody who would be taking us through the entire account of Prasar Bharati's growth story right from the horse's mouth. Let us hear it now. Over to you. ND Road to 2047 series, Amrit Kal, the so-called future growth period of India, which is going to propel India into the global arena as the numero uno country of the world. G20 presidency, the year 2023 should be no different, and we should hear from Mr. Vempati as to how Prasar Bharati, envisions, taking India forward into the next 25 years. Now the Man Ki Baat, over to you, Mr. Vempati. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Very happy to be here and very glad that you are doing this series of talks looking at India and the road ahead. It's a very crucial period for India, especially the last 9 years. What has happened since Modi ji became the Prime Minister, how India's growth story has panned out. Yesterday we saw the GDP growth numbers, where despite a lot of skepticism, a lot of cynicism, India clocked 7.2% economic growth, which I think was stupendous. And a key part of this entire transformation of India over the last 9 years and this road ahead to Amrit Kal is public communication, right? Because any change initiative, any kind of serious reform requires a lot of communication, especially in a country like ours, which is so diverse, which has so much of disparity, so many languages, so many different cultures, so much of variety across the country, and so priorities differ from region to region, concerns and challenges change from region to region. So how do you communicate and clearly sell a vision of change for the country and ensure that every part of the country is aligned to that change vision, becomes a participant, becomes a part of this, and this entire change becomes a mass movement? I think that is where a key role was played by the public broadcaster in aiding this mission, in being a very important mechanism by which this mission was taken forward. Prasar Bharati, as you know, is India's autonomous public broadcaster. It was created in 1997 after an act of parliament. And within it, you have the earlier government departments of Doordarshan and All India Radio, both of which were then brought under the umbrella of Prasar Bharati as an independent autonomous public broadcaster. In India, public broadcasting is very different from the rest of the world, because often people, make this comparison. Why don't we have a BBC? Why don't we have an Al Jazeera? Right? These comparisons are a little misplaced, because the way public broadcasting in India operates is very different from the way it operates in other countries. So, for example, in the UK, where there is a raging debate right now around the future of BBC, which also incidentally turned 100 recently, their entire model is based on a very guaranteed source of revenue through what is called a license fee. So every citizen taxpayer in the UK has to pay a license fee, and that license fee revenues then go to BBC, and that is a guaranteed stream. which in Indian rupee terms, a couple of years back, was almost 30,000 crores. So imagine the kind of guaranteed input that is coming into the public broadcaster of that scale, 30,000 crores. While in their services are very, very few because it's a small country. They have a small footprint domestically. They have a much larger footprint globally. So they have a handful of TV channels, handful of radio stations. So you're talking of 30,000 crores going into less than 10, 15 services. So on a per service basis, you're talking of a huge amount of money flowing in, and hence they're able to do the kinds of things BBC does. Now you come to India, right? You have Doordarshan and All India Radio. There is no license fee in India. So there is no guaranteed revenue stream for Doordarshan or All India Radio. They have to earn their revenue. And then the obligations, the responsibilities of the public broadcaster in India are much larger. Doordarshan, for example, operates more than 30 television channels. It operates more than 400 radio stations. So you're talking of a very vast network of thousands of transmitters, several channels, several stations, and also a very one of its kind DTH platform called DD Free Dish. So the obligations on the public broadcaster in India are very different. And then you look at the language diversity because every region wants its own channel, it wants its own programming, it wants its own news bulletins. So the number of languages in which All India Radio, for example, broadcasts is almost close to 100 when add up the languages and the dialects, both Indian and foreign. So that's a vast diversity, and so we are talking of a very large set of services, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of obligations, with very limited resources. So that is the story of public broadcasting in India. That what we do is very different from what a BBC does or somebody else does. It is not an apples to apples comparison because our domestic responsibilities are immense because we have to do Krishi Darshan, we have to do women's programming, we have to do different dialects, tribal dialects in which content has to be created. So these are responsibilities that no private FM radio or private broadcaster will take up. In fact, there is no private service in many of these regions of India. It is only the public broadcaster that is providing service, especially you take border areas, you take the Northeast region and so on. So in that sense, the challenge of public communication on shoulder, and that's where one great example of how the public broadcaster has been able to fulfill this responsibility despite all the constraints it has on it is with Man Ki Baat. So recently, Man Ki Baat had its 100 episodes end of April. And on that occasion, a book was released by the Honorable Vice President. The book is called Collective Spirit, Concrete Action, Man Ki Baat and its Influence on India. So this book, which was written by me, chronicles the journey of Man Ki Baat over its 100 episodes and how a radio program has taken the country by storm. It has inspired change. It has inspired change makers at the grassroots. And it has created a mass movement over a variety of areas, be it Swachhta, be it water conservation, be it preservation of languages, going cashless with digital. A whole lot of change initiatives that the country has witnessed over the last 9 years. Man Ki Baat has kind of propelled that. Interestingly, this book's foreword has been written by Dr. Shekhar, India's foreign minister. And he, in a series of videos, has spoken extensively about how Man Ki Baat has impacted India and its diplomacy. So it's not just about change within the country, but it is about what change story we are projecting to the world. How is the world perceiving India? And Man Ki Baat has played a very key role in doing that. So there's an entire chapter in the book which actually focuses on this aspect of how India's soft power has been enhanced globally through Man Ki Baat. A great example of that is, if you recall, in 2015, fourth episode of Man Ki Baat was aired in January. President Obama of the US was visiting. He was the chief guest at the Republic Day parade. And so that month's Man Ki Baat was a very unique episode. It had both Prime Minister Modi and President Obama jointly hosting the radio program. And during that program, you can see how both the leaders reached out to the people of India, took up a variety of questions, but more importantly, how that was perceived globally, how that projected India globally, and I think it played a very key role. Then you look at the entire series of episodes on Mann Ki Baat. You will see that one constant topic that keeps coming up every now and then is the Indian diaspora, the large diaspora, and this is where public broadcasting historically has played a very key role in reaching out to the diaspora. In the good old days, it would be through shortwave, through All India Radio's external services. Nowadays, of course, shortwave is not that popular. It is all internet-based digital radio and YouTube and so on, different apps that people are able to consume content. And you will see in Mann Ki Baat that the Prime Minister has shared interesting contributions made by the diaspora from different parts of the world at every stage, be it in popularizing yoga, be it in popularizing Sanskrit, be it in popularizing Bhagavad Gita, for example. He talks about a couple, husband and wife in New Jersey, who have popularized Malkham, a very traditional Indian sport, and gotten it a global audience. So that is one example of diaspora participation. He's talked about Hindi in various parts of the world, native Hindi speakers who are part of the diaspora for several decades, sometimes even more than a century, in different parts of the world, like Fiji, for example, or Mauritius, and so on. So all of these are examples that have come up in Mann Ki Baat at various points in time, and these have been perceived globally in a significant way for people to understand how India is changing, how India is developing. And so the foreign minister talks about all this in his foreword and in the series of videos that he had released. If you look at Prasar Bharti over the years, technology has constantly evolved. Back in the good old days, you had rooftop antennas for Doordarshan. You had medium wave and short wave for All India Radio. That has now shifted to cable and satellite in the case of Doordarshan. It has shifted to FM radio in the case of Akashvani. However, the last few years have seen a dramatic shift in the consumption of digital technology. Now, all content is available on YouTube. It live streams on various apps. It can be accessed through new age devices like Alexa and so on. And of course, the social media presence. And you will see that Mann Ki Baat has also mirrored this evolution of technology. Mann Ki Baat is the first visual radio program. So not only is the Prime Minister talking like the way I'm talking right now as a monologue, but there are visuals overlaid on this monologue, and that is quite an effort because it takes almost once the monologue is recorded or the Prime Minister's interaction with various people, all of that audio is recorded. Then the Doordarshan team, identifies what are the meaningful visuals that can go with this, audio that the Prime Minister is speaking, and then they overlay all these graphics and visuals, and then the visual version of Mann Ki Baat is produced. And the beauty is when the broadcast is aired on radio, simultaneously you will see the visual version being broadcast on various television channels. It also goes live on YouTube and other places. We were looking at TV audience data, and almost more than 120 television channels carry this live. And so what that has done is it has taken the traditional radio and given it a much wider footprint, because it is not just the radio waves, it is also the TV audience, and it is also the digital audience, all put together. Which is why the Mann Ki Baat's reach, as was estimated recently by one of the surveys around the 100th episode, the survey estimated that nearly 1 billion Indians have listened to Mann Ki Baat at some point in time, which is a phenomenal reach, and that is made possible because of this way in which technology has been used through the public broadcaster. The other reason why the reach of Mann Ki Baat is so wide, again, is a reflection of how Doordarshan and All India Radio have played a very crucial role is in languages, because Man Ki Baat is available not just the 20 plus official languages. It is also available in various dialects, various regional जो बोलियां होती है. So you're talking of nearly 40 plus languages and dialects in which Man Ki Baat is produced. There are almost 11 foreign languages, English included, in which Man Ki Baat is broadcast as well on the All India Radio's external service. So it's a very wide footprint. And one of the interesting things that we've done in this book is that towards the end, we put QR codes where you can discover the playlists for each of these languages. So if you want to check out how Man Ki Baat sounds in different languages, you can find the QR code for that playlist. Uh, so that way, public broadcasting and Man Ki Baat have kind of gone hand in hand in taking this message of transformation. So you have the first broadcast that happens by the Prime Minister at 11 a.m., for example, on the last Sunday of the month. Then at 11:30 a.m., the language versions are aired in the various languages that I spoke about, 40 plus Indian languages and so on. And then subsequently, what All India Radio also does is they host a program called Post Office Box 111, which is basically the address at which people write to give suggestions for Man Ki Baat. And that program is aired on the subsequent Sundays. Now, if you look at the way the inputs for Man Ki Baat are sourced, again, it is a reflection of how technology has changed for broadcasting. If you recall earlier days, Surabhi example, people would write in postcards. And even now, a lot of inputs come through postcards. But that is a small part of the input that is coming. Now, a lot of input comes through social media. It also comes through the MyGov platform, for example, where a lot of people write in with suggestions on topics that the Prime Minister should take up. And he's spoken about this periodically on various episodes. People can also call into the IVR platform and leave an audio message. So inputs for Man Ki Baat can come from various directions. And this has kind of made the good old platform of broadcasting, which was a one-way medium, now into a very interactive medium by using digital technologies in a very creative manner and fashion. Then, of course, you have the Narendra Modi app, which again is a very important source of input. Again, a very interactive way of engaging with audiences. So this gives you a picture of how Man Ki Baat and public broadcasting have creatively used technology over the years to reach out to the citizens. So what is the impact? Because that is, I think, the question that everyone asks, right? What is the impact of this? Has it changed radio in any way? Has it changed India in any way? So one of the things that we've done in this book is to focus on impact at three levels. The first is, of course, the direct calls to action that the Prime Minister has issued through Man Ki Baat that are then propagated through TV and radio and social media. What is the impact of those calls to action? And we know there are several of these that have happened over the years, be it selfie with daughter, be it with Incredible India. So whenever the Prime Minister has given a call to action, you can see there's a flood of responses on social media, on mainstream media to these calls to action, and there's a very tangible measure of impact of Man Ki Baat. So that is at one level. The second level is the various people that the Prime Minister has interacted with on Man Ki Baat. He has spoken about them, their work, the impact that Man Ki Baat has had on them. So about 10 of them we've actually interacted with and shared their experiences in this book. So, for example, there is this young lady entrepreneur from one of the tribal villages of Manipur. Her name is Vijay Shanti. In fact, the Prime Minister spoke to her in the 100th episode. Now, she has done some very interesting work with lotus stems to create fabrics, to create new flavors of tea, and so on. Now, her entrepreneurship has resulted in new products, which got a global audience through Man Ki Baat. And then what does happened is not only has demand for her products gone up because now she's more well known and her work is more well publicized. But more interestingly, others have become inspired by her. So now not only is she employing people, she's also become an inspiration figure for others to take up entrepreneurship. So that is another interesting impact of Mann Ki Baat. Similarly, you have individuals from across India. You have Mr. Rajappan, for example, from Kerala, who's a Divyang, who is paralyzed in the waist below. He can barely walk. He has taken up Swachhta in a big way, cleaning up the lakes near his house, removing them of plastics. Because a lot of people, we tend to, throw plastics around. We don't care if, they're floating on water bodies. So he does this every day to go and collect all these plastics and dispose them in a responsible manner. So in this way, you can see that Mann Ki Baat has inspired people to become change agents. It has also created their visibility in a big way, where others are looking up to them as inspiration, as role models, that they also want to do the work that they're doing, and that is creating a multiplier effect, and which is why you'll see whether it's toilet building, making villages open defecation free, be it water harvesting, there is a multiplier effect. Jan Bhagidari or people's participation has increased, primarily because in Mann Ki Baat, all these change makers and their efforts, have been highlighted very extensively. So that is the second area of impact. The third is, of course, more deep studies. In fact, chapter 15, the last chapter of the book, looks at various academic studies, various in-depth studies that have been conducted on how this radio program has impacted change in different parts of India, be it Swachhta, be it motivating people to, for example, give up gas LPG subsidy, and so on. So a whole host of areas. So all these academic studies have been captured in this chapter. Most interesting to me was the most recent study, which was conducted by the Institute for Competitiveness, sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they looked at all the 22 Sustainable Development Goals to assess how Mann Ki Baat has impacted those Sustainable Development Goals. And what you will see is very interesting, that every one of those Sustainable Development Goals has been impacted by this radio program, which kind of tells you how development oriented, how positivity oriented this entire program was, where there's no room for politics, but very clear focus on development. And that, in a way, is the story of the public broadcasting, right? Because Doordarshan and All India Radio are not known for creating controversies, chasing headlines, chasing sensationalism. Instead, they are more focused on positive news, developmental reports. So that is their focus, and hence they're also very highly trusted. There were two studies done by the Reuters Institute for Journalism in UK, Cambridge University, and they have published their annual survey for two subsequent years. And you will find that All India Radio News and DD News are amongst the most trusted news sources in India for 2 years in a running. And then that is underscored by the fact that the public broadcaster continues to have that positivity focus on development, which then brings us to the whole theme of this series of talks that you're having, which is what about the future, right? Where is India headed? India's next 2 decades, as we head to 2047, when we will celebrate the 100 years of Indian independence. So looking to the future, you will see that a lot of focus has to be on innovation, entrepreneurship, startups, technology, harnessing technology for positive change across the country. And again, these are topics which are very, very dear to the Honorable Prime Minister, and you'll see that Mann Ki Baat has immense focus on technology and startups and people doing innovative things at the grassroots. Because that is the foundation on which the future of India will be built, be it drones startups, be it space startups, be it startups in the bio field, interesting work being done in Ayush, in organic foods, whole range of areas. And the heartening thing is that these young achievers have also found a place on Mann Ki Baat, and as a result, their work has been amplified. They've been given immense confidence. Their lot of boost to their entrepreneurship, their dynamism has been given by Man Ki Baat. And that is where the public broadcaster again plays a very interesting role. So, for example, the Doordarshan had this series on startups, where over a series of 12 episodes, various sectors were highlighted. Now, there's a second season going on of that. And so what you see is the entrepreneurship across India in different pockets of India. People like the country, despite challenges, are risking capital, putting their ingenuity, putting their out of the box to create interesting applications, and not just digital. It's you're talking of agri startups, you're talking of manufacturing startups, space startups, so a whole wide range of areas where all these guys are contributing, and that is making a difference. And so the public broadcaster is has a very important role in keeping that momentum going for India's future development. And an interesting and important part of that is the global outreach. So, for example, traditionally you had the All India Radio's external services, but now you have DD India, which is Doordarshan's footprint for the globe, which is available in many countries, in Korea, in the US, in Australia, through traditional broadcasting. Then, of course, through YouTube and the app, it is available everywhere across the world. And what this international footprint is playing a very important role in conveying the growth story, the change story of India, so that all this misinformation, all this fake news, the motivated editorials that are published, they are busted, and to give the correct picture, to give the correct factual reality of India. I think this global outreach is playing a very, very important role. So broadly, these are the various dimensions in which the public broadcaster is contributing, and Man Ki Baat has, of course, been a highlight of public broadcasting in India for the last 9 years, and so very thankful that the Prime Minister chose this platform for the good old radio for hosting his monthly interaction with the citizens. So thanks once again for this opportunity and to share these thoughts. My very best wishes to this Amrit Kal series.
Shashi, some interactions, with you, as I've heard from you about the entire process of Man Ki Baat impacting the nation's future and the growth story. It's impacting considerably. Yes, Prasar Bharti is probably the most trusted brand, and there are no two opinions about it, because the sincerity and the kind of truthfulness of the news, the way it is presented, is something which we should be proud of. But what about the popularity aspect? What do you think could have been done better to increase the popularity amongst the 2023 citizens of India?
That's always a challenge, right? Because if you're doing development-oriented programming, it is not sensational, it is not popular in the popular sense. So there has to be a balance. So, for example, during the lockdown, we saw when we aired Ramayana, Mahabharata, they were instantly extremely popular. Doordarshan established world records in terms of viewership during that period. But of course, that is much difficult to sustain, especially in today's environment where there's a lot of OTT content. There's all kinds of content. So one way in which you can balance out these conflicting demands of developmental content and popular content is to think of creative programming, where developmental messages can be delivered in a very creative manner. So there are some serials, for example, Swaraj series, which is one of Doordarshan's highest budget productions in its entire history, which is I think right now somewhere in its 40th episode or so. Is a 75 episode series specifically focused on Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, bringing stories of unsung heroes across India in the fight for independence. So creative programming of this nature, which has an inbuilt developmental message, but is also presented in a popular manner, which everyone can relate to, will be the way to go. For example, on the radio side, Vivid Bharti continues to be very popular. with Bharti's, Bule Bisre Geet, all the old song programs, film song programs, uh, and so blending developmental messages with such popular entertainment programming formats, which are time tested, I think is the way to go, and that is how Doordarshan and All India Radio will have to, engage audiences. Of course, they will always be constrained by the diversity of obligations, because you have to service so many languages, so many stations, so many channels. So on a per channel, per service basis, you will have very limited resources, and they will have to work with that. And that reality will not change, because India is so diverse, and then the public broadcaster has the responsibility to service every part of India.
So are you telling me it is yet another case of a social business or a social venture, the burden of which is being borne by the public at large?
Yes, absolutely. It has to be, because there is no escaping that reality. Because vast parts of India continue to be, underdeveloped, underserved, and as take the case of COVID-19, right? During the pandemic, in fact, the pandemic is a great lesson why the public broadcaster is so important. You had to deliver social messaging in so many different languages, so people understand, first of all, what is COVID-19, what are the precautions to be taken. And private media is not going to do that. They will be, focused on the big markets, the big languages. They are not focused on, Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand, or the remote parts of Northeast, Arunachal, and so on. So that is where the public broadcaster has to step up and provide the COVID-19 messaging. And this was not just 1 month or one day. It was like entire more than 2 years that this exercise had to be done. Take the case of education during lockdown, when the schools were closed. The Doordarshan channels dedicated several hours for classroom broadcasts in various languages, targeted at students of different states. And in fact, this was acknowledged by international media as well. The Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, the South China Morning Post, all of them acknowledged how, in India, despite the lockdown, despite schools being shut, the fact that you had DD Free Dish, you had all this free-to-air educational broadcast made a huge difference. So this will not go away. These are very important things, and that burden will have to be carried.
People like Mr. Sayani, Amit Sayani, the great old Amit Sayani ji, almost becomes synonymous with the All India Radio's voice for years. That Behno or Bhaiyo thing still rings into the ears of people of that generation even to date. I mean, could we not have looked at ambassadors who could have played a significant role, like Amitabh Bachchan ji?
Yes, and it keeps happening from time to time. Like a lot of Amitabh Bachchan ji's inputs were very valuable during, for example, the launch of DD Kisan, or a lot of the programming around Swachh Bharat, right? And similarly, we did Kaun Banega Crorepati for the first time, KBC in Kashmiri, targeted at the Jammu Kashmir region. So from time to time, these kinds of initiatives have been taken. But as I said, again, you have to balance it out, between the commercial and the developmental, given that
Is there a scope
you have
for
limited
PPP?
resources.
Is there a scope for PPP with the public broadcaster?
Absolutely. In fact, that is where the future lies. I think PPP models have to be found out creatively, so that you can achieve both these goals. DD Free Dish is a great example of public-private partnership. It generates nearly 1,000 crores of revenue, because private channels participate in an auction to take slots on DD Free Dish. So not only are you delivering the Doordarshan channels, you're delivering 60 radio channels, you're delivering nearly 50 plus educational channels, along with the 60 private channels. And the 60 private channels are participating in a very competitive fashion, resulting in this 1,000 crores of revenue for the public broadcaster. So that's a great example of a public-private model that has worked for the public broadcaster. We can look at similar such models for other initiatives.
I mean, the Prime Minister's call has been answered by a lot of corporates in various initiatives like Swachh Bharat, as you were rightly pointing out. Initiatives which are taken forward by the government and spelled out by the Prime Minister in the dispensation. Should the private sector not come ahead in also supporting the public broadcaster using through their various initiatives or sponsorship or CSR or whatever you may call? And if there have been such examples, could you cite a few of them?
Sure. So one I've already given you on DD Pradesh. In the past, there was Satyameva Jayate, which again was a simulcast between the private and the public broadcasters. The biggest example is, of course, cricket and sports. Today, by law, the sports rights holders are required to share their signals with Doordarshan DD Sports whenever the Indian team is playing. And so that brings a lot of commercial sports content, which is otherwise very expensive. The rights are, prohibitively expensive. That comes on DD Sports, and again, that's another valuable source of revenue. So these are two great examples where the public-private model has worked for the public broadcasters, bringing popular content that we're bringing audiences and creating an opportunity for social messaging to reach a very large population.
The schools and the institutions are a very important fabric for outreach. Now, what have been the initiatives taken forward by Prasar Bharti and you for reaching out to the schools? Because that could really ingrain the habit of, using Prasar Bharti or getting into the psyche of the citizens. What are the initiatives? I'm sure you got my question. Are there any initiatives that you're taking?
Sure. So one very interesting initiative which was taken in the context of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav was called AAR Next, where 1 hour was dedicated across all the 400 radio stations for local schools and colleges to come and do their programming. So as part of this AAR Next initiative, you had school students come to the radio studio and they can either perform, they can give a talk, they can host a debate, whatever. It's their creativity on topics of public, national interest, and that generated immense popularity with children across India. Various schools and colleges got a chance to visit the studios and present their talent, and it also creates an opportunity for All India Radio to spot upcoming talent, because if you see, the entire creative talent industry in India owes their origins to All India Radio or Doordarshan. So this creates a platform for future talent to emerge. So this was taken up in a big way, and I think it's a continuing initiative across these various stations.
The All India Radio, houses a huge repository of music, classical and otherwise, something which is, part of India's fabric, social fabric for the last hundreds of years. The greatest of musicians have performed on the All India Radio. And today the classical, like yoga, like Ayurveda, music, which is, something which is very, very strongly owned by All India Radio, especially the golden years of the 50s, 60s, 70s, Allah Rakha and Zakir Hussain's and all these people. I mean, have you done anything to popularize the classical music through All India Radio or Doordarshan?
So I think that's a great question you asked, because the archives of Prasar Bharati are a treasure. They're a national treasure. The digitization process of these archives had started some years back, but they were all just sitting in some server. There was no way for the public to access them. So one of the things that we did was not only to accelerate the digitization process of the archive, but to make it easily accessible to the public at large. So we started putting content on YouTube, putting it on the app, on the internet, so that people can experience and consume this archival content. Now, in the process, a lot of historical content has emerged. The first radio broadcast of the 1930s, iconic recordings of speeches by Pandit Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi, and all the prime ministers, all the presidents. Rare footages from Emergency, for example, which none of us have seen. So all of those things have emerged from the archives, and all of these are now publicly accessible. And when it comes to classical music, it is just immense. You have all the great artists, their voices, immortal voices, available on these radio archives. What we've done is we've done three things. One, of course, we put them on YouTube, so you can discover this content and consume it on YouTube. Second, we've dedicated a radio channel completely for classical music called Ragam, and it carries all the classical music from South India, North India, all the different traditions on this 24/7. So you have another means to consume classical music. The third thing that has been done is to create a interactive sort of an app where you can browse the archives and you can listen to these recordings on demand. along with the various magazines that have been produced by All India Radio. So that is another way in which you can consume this content. Then on the TV side, a lot of these artists have also held classes where they have taught, for example, Kathak lessons have been given by the most famous, most iconic of Kathak gurus. So all of that content is available online now through both on the visual side and also on the radio side. We've also given this entire archive to IIT Kanpur to develop artificial intelligence-based algorithms. So you can easily search and mine the archives and find interesting content. So, for example, we had a very long recording of the debate in Parliament during the Bangladesh war. And in that debate, you find the voice of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, perhaps his oldest speech available in audio format. So things like that, and this would be possible if you had algorithms which can recognize voices, recognize faces, and allow you to experience this very rich repository of India's modern India's history over the last 7 decades.
I mean, there has been a lot of questions raised about the funding aspects of Prasar Bharati, and a lot of concerns raised even by your chairman, Mr. Surya Prakash. As far as my knowledge goes, I mean, is funding such a big issue, and is the government supportive? And if there are areas of improvement, what are your suggestions for the government?
See, it's a continuous process, right? Because we don't have a license fee. So every year, Doordarshan and All India Radio have to earn their revenues to run their operations. Because the government support goes towards the salaries of government employees. And that population is dwindling because they're all retiring. These are all old DD, old AAR employees who are government employees and who are on the verge of retirement. So all of the operational expenditure has to be funded through revenues, and which is why you need these public-private models. So having cricket on DD Sports creates extra revenue because the private content is available on the public platform. Similarly, having DD Free Dish have auctions for the slots creates revenue because private channels have to compete to come on DD Free Dish. So all of these provide a buffer in terms of funding. But of course, it is nowhere compared to what the international public broadcasters are able to get because of the license fee. So that gap will always be there, and we have to think of interesting ways, new ways to generate more sources of revenue. One is, of course, monetizing the archives. Second is assets. There are a lot of assets that the public broadcaster has. Large amounts of land, buildings. So perhaps there could be creative ways in which those assets can be monetized as well. So these are new ways in which additional funding sources can be created for the public broadcast.
Your call or your opinion on privatization, if Air India can be, do you think the same route can be followed for
there is no need for that, because see, the Air India case, it's very different, right? Flying an airline is not the business of government, but developmental communication is the responsibility of government. Who's going to do it otherwise? If the government steps away from it, the private sector will never step into it because it's not viable, right? Still, flying an airline is viable. You can still make money out of flying an airline. But doing public broadcasting in remote corners of India, you will not make money, right? So I don't see that happening. I don't see a reason for privatizing the public broadcaster, because there are certain responsibilities that Parliament has given to Prasar Bharati as part of the Prasar Bharati Act, and those responsibilities can only be shouldered by the public broadcaster. Nobody else can do it.
And the allegations of the public broadcasting being used by the government as its mouthpiece?
That's a very popular question. I think a lot of people ask me, and my counter to that is this: on DD Free Dish, competing with DD News, there are nearly 20 Hindi news channels of various private broadcasters. So not only am I carrying the DD News version to the 5 crore homes which have DD Free Dish, but I'm also carrying these 20 private channels perspective as well. So in that sense, there is a diversity of content that's available through the public broadcaster, and it's for people to choose what they want to consume.
And recruitment issues, there were raised a lot of questions, a lot of eyebrows were raised during the 2010 or 2000 Congress era, especially. about the recruitment issues not being
Yes,
very.
that's an open area, and I think I'm sure the current management and the current leadership is looking at it because that is something that has to be urgently done. We had conducted a manpower audit as recommended by one of the many committees, and based on the manpower audit's recommendation, the manpower modernization has to be undertaken. And I'm sure the current leadership is acting on that because people are retiring, and so there will be a gap, and that gap has to be filled.
And the role of involving lateral hiring, I mean, we're towards the end of our show today. The more you've answered, I mean, through your 29-minute monologue, you've answered almost a lot of aspects, almost every aspect of Prasar Bharti, most wonderfully. I mean, going forward, what do you think are the areas of improvement in terms of, especially in terms of the content innovation? Because content innovation partnerships is what is going to drive the entire thing, because language, for example, is a differentiator between Didi, the Prasar Bharati, and the other private channels. And when we talk about languages, it has been an Achilles heel in the government's entire machinery over the last 5-6 years, especially from the regional perspective. And Didi is doing a fantastic job from a language unification perspective. So why aren't you using this particular strength of Doordarshan for also helping the country understand that it's not only Hindi, it's not only a particular language which is being pushed by the government, but also other languages are being equally treated equally importantly.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the initiatives to do this under the Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat framework was to dub content, across languages. So that way, content from one region can be, made available to audience in other regions. And this has been done with a number of serials, television serials, and radio dramas, and so on. So that is, definitely there. But you hit on a very important subject, which is content innovation. And I think the future is about content innovation. It is about using technology creatively. And that will only happen if we are able to modernize the workforce, bring in young blood, young creative blood who are technology savvy, who have the latest skills, who are able to, create these innovative products. So the manpower angle, the content innovation angle, both go hand in hand and have to be addressed together to be able to, build a future roadmap for the public broadcaster. Because unless the content is engaging, audiences will not come, and if audiences don't come, then your social messaging is not reaching the people that you want it to reach.
You see, privatization, the question when I raised about privatization, one of the issues, that the public broadcaster would be facing is in which ways the other channels, the other electronic media, especially, or the print media, is landing up with the private investors, is landing up with the private corporates, who are then being accused of partisan, news reporting from their affiliation perspectives. At the same time, Doordarshan in that situation would be left behind. So, I mean, because you are only focusing on development news. So, I mean, what is the, I mean, I'm not really sure about the solutions you have for making this something which becomes a household name. Like the Prime Minister has made so many initiatives as a household name today. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is one of them. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao Abhiyan is one of them. Similarly, Doordarshan Dekho Abhiyan, the Hamara Doordarshan kind of Abhiyan, something like that could have been looked at to make this, national news carrier as our household name.
Sure, I think that is something definitely the current leadership will, I'm sure, will look at. In fact, if you look at what is happening during the COVID period, it was exactly that, right? The whole momentum around people watching, tuning back into the public broadcaster. Similar momentum was started with Swaraj when the Prime Minister talked about it in Man Ki Baat. Languages. So initiatives of this nature will have to drive it. Of course, a campaign of that scale will require a lot of input as well in terms of funding. And I'm sure the leadership will, find those sources of funding to, track that the Reuters survey over 2 years has confirmed that DD News and AR News are the most trustworthy. To me is a sign that these are continue to be household names. They are continue to be brands that people go back to. Of course, they are not as competitive as the private sector because the private sector has a different motive, commercial motive, which these brands don't have. But despite that limitation, I think they're still doing reasonably well.
People have been, we are ending the show today. Shashi ji, it is such a pleasure to talk to a man who knows holistically about the way the nation has progressed for the last 9 years, 9 completed years of the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Bhai Modi. And people keep talking about you being too pro-Modi, too pro-government, but I guess that's part of the job. You have to be in the system to improve the system. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shashi Shekhar Vempati ji. It's a pleasure talking to you. Namaskar and Jai Hind.
Thank you.